over 80% of people that graduate from college with a specific degree don't end up following that degree once they get established in their career. 50% of small businesses every year that start up go out of business within 2 years. Because that's what holds most people in business back. They could have a great idea, they could be perfectly suited for implementing that idea, and the minute they start letting those fear elements get in their head, that's what either prolongs the start or gets it to the point where it never takes off.
Do you think $1 billion plus is possible while remaining ethical?
Oh, wow.
So, Steve, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for hopping on.
Hey, man, it's been great for you guys to have me here. I'm looking forward to it.
I appreciate it. So, I know you're more of a business leadership coach. Is that kind of how, like, if somebody were to tell you, hey, give me like a 15-second elevator pitch, is that like a good introduction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say so?
And anybody in a leadership role that either owns a business or is responsible for a larger portion of a bigger business.
I see. That's very interesting. So what are are there any some high level figures that you could publicly state that you've coached, or is it all under NDA and can't really discuss?
Great question.
All right. So I'll tell you two people. I can't tell you their names, but I can tell you what industry and what level they were at.
Okay. Yeah.
One is currently an NFL player.
Okay,
And,
currently still.
Oh,
okay.
Still now.
Nice.
The other one had a prior board seat on Tesla.
Wow. Okay.
So
very cool.
Yeah. So, but that's very much the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Normally, I don't float around in lofty atmospheres like that. So,
how did you land those two? Like, what was it like?
The first one was a referral. The second one was through an existing client, and all of a sudden, this person popped up, and I just didn't see it coming.
Huh.
So
just by doing your job and just kind of
just doing what I do. A lot of times I'll have clients will say, "Hey, can I invite so and so on?" And I'm good with that because you never know. Sometimes they might get some benefit out of it and decide to get their own service.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to kind of promote from within.
For sure. So what are I'm always been curious about this. What are some different characteristics that you see high performers have that your average Joe Schmo doesn't really even think about to begin with?
Okay, the first one, and this is going to sound very contrary, all right? But people that are really, really at the top of their game are usually all the time preoccupied with details, really extraneous stuff. Because what they've learned over time is the biggest mistakes they made were because they weren't looking at the details. So now they've become kind of addicted to staying in the details. That's the problem, though, because with what they're responsible for doing, they don't have time for that.
They have so much going on in their plate.
Got so much going on. So on the one hand, they're afraid they're going to miss something. But on the other hand, if they spend too much time doing that, they stop looking at the bigger picture where they can have real influence.
Huh. So they're just hella detail oriented. That's it. Like, would you say is there a maniac side of them? What do you think?
There can be. I have one gentleman now who owns his own shipping and transport company, and he's got a whole team of people. They probably got 70 people in this organization, but he spends most of his day researching his industry on the internet and talking to a few of his friends and coming up with kind of his version of what's going on in the industry. And it doesn't always mean it's correct. It just means based on the sources he's gone to, this is what he's learning. But a lot of times he'll bypass the team of people that directly report to him who are closer to the ground than he is because he's gotten so used to getting these little bits and pieces off of his internet sources that he kind of thinks I found gold, right? Nobody else hit this jackpot but me.
Yeah.
And many times he's in the right ballpark, but it's not good enough that you could go to bat with it.
Yeah, because I say that because I feel, at least from a CEO's perspective, to want to continue to grow after a certain revenue that you might hit in your business, there needs to be an external, maybe even internal battle actually that you're battling with to push you to that limit.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I don't know. Let's talk about guys like Elon Musk, for example, somebody like that. What on earth are you thinking to want to build spaceships, rocket ships, and satellite all over the world.
I've never met Elon Musk. I know him like most everybody do. I see his interviews. I watch things that he does on the internet.
Yeah.
And to me, here's a guy that, number one, has no visible evidence of fear, of risk taking.
He just doesn't care.
Everything is, he calculates and he sees if it fits his platform, and if it does, boom, he does it. And so he doesn't seem like typical people that would sit back and say, okay, what am I going to lose if this doesn't work? Because that's what holds most people in business back. They could have a great idea. They could be perfectly suited for implementing that idea. And the minute they start letting those fear elements get in their head, that's what either prolongs the start or gets it to the point where it never takes off, because they're too occupied with what they could lose if it doesn't work.
And in your opinion, like, you think guys who like just achieve great success just don't have that? Like, it's just like a...
Yeah, I think a lot of them. Well, Richard Branson's another great example. I mean, that guy probably has ownership in somewhere between 400 and 450 different companies worldwide.
How do you even manage that?
That's wild.
He just has, he's at a guidance level, he's at a governance level. There are people on the ground at various levels that do all that work. But he, who's the other gentleman? I can't think of his name now. He just lost his sidekick. The guy died just a couple of days ago.
Oh, Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. There's another guy, very calculating, but also looks at things in a very matter-of-fact state. If it fits his financial formula, he'll go for it. And he's not flashy. I mean, I just read something I thought was interesting. He's still driving a car that's like 15 or 18 years old.
Doesn't he drive like a Camry or something?
Yeah, it's nothing. But that's just the way he is. He's very grounded, and I find a lot of other people that aren't of the newer generation that are all about kind of flash on the internet. Some of these people are very private. They almost don't really want you knowing all the stuff they're into, because that's going to color your perception of who they are. And they're just trying to be normal in a very abnormal environment that they've gotten into because they've reached the level of success they have.
So, interesting, question for you. Do you think $1 billion plus is possible while remaining ethical?
Oh, wow. I think it is, but I think from the very beginning, everything that you consider doing, you have to put through that ethical lens. People you hire, the people you bring on, the people you invest with. If you do what so many companies today do, where they bring in venture capitalist firms or other people to do things, and as long as the financial elements make sense, their hands are clean. And you can't do that if you're looking to build an empire ethically and have it be beyond reproach.
Yeah, I feel like it's like once you get to a certain point, you kind of lose control of like how things go.
Oh yeah,
it's not really even up to you. Like it's like you have to answer to investors, you have to answer to your board, you have to answer to external factors, and those people have different motivations.
Well, how refreshing would it be if a company got in hot water over something? All right, some social issue that they didn't handle well, or something was said that shouldn't have been said. How refreshing would it be to have the CEO make a public statement that was genuine and wasn't scripted by all the lawyers and everybody that says, no, you can't say this, you got to say that. And just get up there and say, look, you know what? We didn't see this right. We made a mistake. Or maybe like the CEO of Chick-fil-A, he went on the offensive a couple of years ago when his company was being targeted for some slant against a certain portion of the population. And he backed it up. He said, look, this is who we are. We're Christian based. We don't open on Sundays. We do all this stuff to let people know who we are other than the business.
Yeah.
And so, whether you liked it or not, you have to give the guy credit for at least being honest with what he really thinks, as opposed to delivering some schmarmy response that nobody can figure out.
Yeah.
Almost as like an apologetic statement just to appease the masses.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I remember Chick-fil-A. They were talking. I think it was like the whole why don't you open on Sunday? That was the thing. And then there was like a quote. Was it a quote by? He's like, yeah, we could make a lot more money in sales, but we just decided against it because
it's not part of their value system.
Yeah, so. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, because like I've always I was watching this video by a friend of mine who's like a pretty big YouTuber, and he was discussing how after $1 billion, you have to do unethical things to continue to grow. And, you know, it's an interesting concept because you're kind of at that point, you know, because like, you know, the whole philosophy of like, you're not really making money, you're taking money.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole kind of zero-sum game where you're making it, somebody else is losing it.
Yeah. So it's like, because like the money's flowing through the economy and you're just attaching yourself to it and like taking it.
Right.
You know?
And look, I know, I can't give you any examples right off the top of my head, but I know there are businesses out there that operate exactly like that. Some companies that buy up, I just read in the paper today, this is a good example, Macy's, very traditional department store. Okay, they got a lot of history. You know, they had a big place in New York City for a lot of years. And over the last 10 years, it's just steadily been declining. I mean, retailing in general has not been doing well. And these guys are just having a tough time. So they've been for sale. And so now the financial aspects of Wall Street are basically saying the people who buy them are not going to be buying them to resurrect retailing. They're going to be buying them because the land that this buildings sit on are worth much more than the business itself. So they may buy it and chop up half of it, get rid of the stores, sell the real estate, you know, do that highest and best use of the property it sits on. And so that's a great example of somebody seeing an opportunity to go in and leverage what somebody else has built over time and take it for themselves.
What would you say from like all the people you've coached, right? From those who like struggle in business, aside from the fear aspect that you discussed, who struggle in business and those who actually like accomplish or achieve success, whatever success means in their mind, could be $1 million, $500,000, whatever it is, right? What have you noticed, like, it's just from like a leadership characteristic standpoint that they have that like maybe the audience or whoever's listening to can kind of write notes down and like be like, all right, don't do this, do this.
All I have to do is mentally go through my lineup of clients right now, and I know exactly how to answer that.
Yeah.
People that are fundamentally just driven to successful outcomes. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're doing today will be that success. Sometimes this becomes a springboard for something later on that becomes successful. But these folks are what a lot of us in this industry call, they're coachable. They're willing to open up and recognize that not everything that they know or have done in the moment was the right thing to do, and they can learn from someone else.
I see. Okay.
When you have somebody that has that openness and is willing to realize that even, I mean, every company that I've ever worked with the exception of 3, have all been in industries that I've never actually been in.
Oh, really?
So I get a lot of this, like, how can you coach me if you don't know the restaurant business or you don't know manufacturing or stuff like that? And I tell them, take the name and the brand of your product, take the size and scope of it, and take the location and just put it to the side. What do you have left? You basically got the skeleton of the organization. That's pretty much the same for most every business. Every business has a marketing department and a sales team and finance and compliance and legal help.
We can kind of put that in like a cool analogy where it's like, you know, every athlete of you know, whatever sport, they have different skill sets that their body is capable of competing. But when you take away the surface level, what do you have? You have a beating heart, right?
Yeah.
You have the breathing lungs. The core of the human being who can perform those technical things is exactly the same every single time.
Right. And it's the same way in business.
Yeah.
So what I look for people when I get people calling or I've got a schedule to talk to somebody, the first thing I look for is, are you coachable? Or are you so kind of stuck in your own mindset, in your own way of doing things, that nobody can reach you? And if that's the case, and you already realize you're going down the wrong path, it's just a matter of time before you burn out.
Okay, so I have a question. So based on what you just said right there, right? If they're kind of like stuck into, I guess, their own ways, you can say, or like they see things as black and white, or they always believe that their way is the best way.
Right.
You mentioned that a lot of people at the top are detail oriented, right? But you mentioned in a way like that's a problem that exists with them currently. What on earth led them to arrive at that position if they are the type of person who's so focused on the little details? when we know, in fact, in order to kind of like rise up, you have to, in a sense, take a step away from the little details here and there, kind of like see how things work, then, approach it that way rather than focus on the little details. How did they achieve that level of success if they are such a detail-oriented person?
Okay. Being detail-oriented, you can be detail-oriented as long as at some point when you're moving up an organization, you're willing to share the leadership and the authority with others. But it's the people that go up the ladder and never give that up.
So don't be a control freak, basically.
Yeah. They not only have a penchant for details, but they're so control-oriented that they won't let anybody else in to do the things that they really shouldn't be doing. When you have that combination, then you have somebody that's probably not going to last long in that role.
So it's safe to say, like, someone who isn't coachable probably isn't at the top, or has never reached the top, or will never reach the top.
And yes, and most of the time when I get those folks, what I find out is they've been struggling for years to get to that next level. And they can't figure out why all of their efforts fall short.
Yeah.
And most of the time, it's because they've gotten so deep in the weeds on knowledge and things that they think other people will be enamored by, and they've been unwilling to share the reins with anybody else. They become the bottleneck. And the rest of the organization has already figured that out. So once everybody else figures out that this person not only can't get out of their own way, but they can't get out of anybody else's way, there's no benefit to having them running the ship.
What about, like, have you ever had any instances where, like, you've dealt with somebody who had, like, a significant loss, whether it's financially or, actually let's speak financial. Let's say somebody, like, spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years building something and then it just goes bankrupt.
Yes.
And then they just lose their groove or their momentum or their desire to grow, and they're just sitting there like, well, this is depressing. Have you worked with people like that? And if you have, like, what sort of tips or what sort of things did you do to kind of get them to gain that momentum back again?
All right. I've never worked with anybody who was fresh off of a bankruptcy. Usually what I get, and I'm thinking of this guy now that I worked with, he ran a distribution company back in Tennessee. And at one point, I wasn't really even looking for this. It just kind of came up in conversation. Because I was asking him, I said, why is it so important that you keep trying to drive this business? And he said, because I've done this twice before and I failed both times. And he goes, this time, it's not just my money, it's my partner's money. So I have to figure out how to make this work. So he figured out how to bounce back, okay? Sometimes the loss is so severe, it causes people to either get out, kind of like investing. You make a bad investment, you lose your entire portfolio, people just leave the market.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just means somebody has to take some time off, reassess what they really want. Because what I find a lot too is people, and I know I'm probably going to get some blowback from this too, but people, a lot of times you'll hear people say things like follow your passion, right? Fairly common term.
Yeah, I think that's crap.
In the entrepreneurial world. And I tell people the same thing. I say, do not do that. Because passion is nothing but emotional fuel. It's great to have behind a well thought out idea that you're really committed to. But passions can change. The same passion you started with is probably not going to be what you have later in life. Find your calling. Find that one thing that you naturally gravitate to, regardless of the situation you're in. And when you find that, that's what you follow. You bring passion in when you really need to get over the tough challenges, the humps, the things that take you from here to here. But passions they're emotionally based, so they're fleeting by nature. I love riding motorcycles. My wife and I do a lot of that for touring around the state and everything. I have no interest in owning a motorcycle dealer. It's limited.
Sure.
So yeah, I tell people a lot of times if the business you failed in wasn't the right business for you to start with, you've got to sit back and reevaluate that. Sometimes people get into things because monetarily it's lucrative, or they know someone else, somebody completely different from them that got into it and made way more money than they deserve to make. Maybe they didn't really have the academic background, or the social skills or other things that people tend to hook towards being successful. Yet these people are. They're making a lot of money. They're living a great life. And you're sitting there saying, well, maybe I should do the same thing. And that's usually what happens. When you take somebody else's yardstick to measure your success, very rarely does it ever work.
So how do you reignite the fire in somebody if they don't have it anymore?
If somebody's lost that drive, then what I typically try to help them figure out is, what did you actually lose? Did you lose any family members? Did you lose your home? Did you have to file bankruptcy? You kind of go down these lists of these hellacious things that would kill somebody. Mm-hmm. And usually when you get to the bottom of it, you realize, okay, you tried something. I mean, here's a great example. When I started coaching in 2008, I bought into a franchise. Very small startup franchise. It was a privately held firm that decided to change from being a privately held business model to a franchise model. And I just happened to be one of like 12 people that got in there on the ground floor. And I thought, okay, this is worth it. Okay. Great experience. 2.5 years later, they filed bankruptcy. And I'm thinking, holy crap, what am I going to do now? But at that point, I had probably dumped about $100,000 into this thing. And I'm thinking, everybody else is going back to the industry they came from when they first fell in love with coaching. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? I don't have that industry to go back to. I said goodbye to that industry. And I decided I was going to pursue something that I genuinely thought I was good at. And I wasn't going to turn around and try to go back and reinvent myself in some old industry I came out of. And I ran into so many people that were just so heartbroken. All they could do is go back to comfortable environment. That was their way of kind of getting over the hurt. And so about 30 days went by, and I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? And my wife comes in one day. She goes, well, you're always telling me about clients who stay way beyond their contract because they like working with you. Why don't you just do your own thing? And I'm like, oh, my God, eureka. Why didn't I think of that? Well, I was too much in my own head. So a lot of times you don't think of the obvious when you're too busy having your own private pity party. And so I took about 30 days, rebuilt it out, and it took me another 3 years to kind of establish myself. Best thing that ever happened. Best thing. I could not be here where I am today if I hadn't gone through that bankruptcy of the franchise company that I had bought my franchise from.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that when we originally kind of chatted.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting because it's like that little downfall is what made your whole career.
Absolutely. I mean, I learned things from those guys, including a lot of what not to do, which is always helpful. You don't want to keep repeating the same bad behavior or anything else like that. And that's what got me here. And so I'm even though, you can always go back and say, gee, what could I have done with all that money if I didn't lose it? Well, that was my investment. That was my MBA.
Yeah, I always think about because I dropped out of college. So I always think about my ups and downs in my career as like my college tuition.
Well, I mean, if you think of all the famous people today that are, I mean, way beyond the top of their game that never finished school. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a long list of them. So you're in good company.
I never liked it. I was never interested in it,
Absolutely.
I think it's funny because my wife was telling me about this yesterday. She's like, I've noticed, Adam, you only study things that you can apply immediately. You're never interested in conversations that don't. Like, remember yesterday we were talking about the honey stuff? Uh-huh. She was asking you all these questions left and right. When we left, she was like, you really don't care, huh? And I'm like, no, I do care. But what kind of life-changing material is that going to give me if I learn more about what this honey does over this one, So
that's good party trivia.
Yeah,
you run into somebody, you can if you see an opportunity to throw that in there.
Oh, she's great with that.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
It's funny. You know what that connects really well to? It's like, dude. So the guy who has a college degree, right? All the stuff that he learned, few far in between, like the important stuff. It's like you mentioned earlier. It's for the purpose of him just telling other people, "Hey, this is what I know," in order to get praise from it.
Right. Get accolades or be looked at as having a certain level of value because you have a lot of academia behind you.
Yeah.
And the sad part about that today is not only are a lot of kids coming out of school with hellacious amounts of debt that they have to repay, but the stats on what I'm going to tell you here haven't really changed much in about the last 40 years. over 80% of people that graduate from college with a specific degree don't end up following that degree once they get established in their career.
Yeah. I've had that happen so many times because we're in the cybersecurity business, and a lot of the engineers we hire, you'd be like, one has like a sociology degree, one has like, I'm like, what the heck?
Right.
And then they just ended up completely changing everything.
So
Right.
I wanna like go back to the conversation where it's like, hey, you know, after a person has, you know, whether they're at the bottom trying to start or they, you know, experienced a downfall, right? I want to transition that conversation into, what do you think of the idea when people say you have to have an irrational level of self-belief and self-confidence? Do you believe in that? And then I'll have a follow-up question afterwards.
I'm not sure how to address the irrational part, but I do think that anybody that's going to be a successful entrepreneur has to have a deep-seated level of belief in themselves and a certain level of confidence about what they're able to do under really extraordinary challenges. So it's not what you know in the moment that you can take care of. It's, what if I put you in a room you've never been in before and turned all the lights out and said, okay, find your way out? Some people would be so overcome with that they would just sit
Freeze.
and wait, and hopefully one day somebody would turn the lights on and let them out. But if you know, say, okay, I've got a process that I can figure this out, you know, those are the kind of entrepreneurs that will always figure out a way to overcome the things that stop most people in their tracks. So yes, I think you do have to have a fundamental sense of belief, but I call it an internal belief because a lot of people walk around with belief tattooed all over their clothes. You know, it's their ego. And those folks, that belief will crumble. You know, the first time they show up to something that's really, really overwhelming, it's not going to last. But if you've gone through that a number of times and you've realized that, okay, under the worst of situations, I found a way out and I actually got better as a result of it, that kind of inner confidence has staying power.
For sure. Oh yeah, I could relate back to
So it's
mine,
not necessarily like irrational in the sense of just like, you know, there's like aggression behind it,
Yes.
or, you know, but rather it's a very calm, rational approach in which it's, you know, something you just remind yourself.
It's very methodical in nature. You know, you can be unassuming. You don't have to be so high pitched that when you walk in a room with a bunch of people, you suck the air out because it's all about you and nobody else gets to talk.
Right.
There's a lot of people out there like that. But if you've really got that inner confidence that says, you know what, I need to survey the land, I need to see where I'm at, what I'm dealing with, who else is involved, I can figure this out.
Yeah, but there is a lot of cases of like egomaniacs that.
Oh yeah, there's no
Like,
shortage
have
of
you
that.
seen the?
Yeah, so I mean, the main reason why I asked this question is because I feel like, you know, just growing up in like, you know, sports environments and whatnot, you know, there's you almost begin to develop this sense of like irrational self-belief and self-confidence and whatnot. But then what ends up happening is it starts to come off as arrogant.
Yes.
And that's when I begin to question my personality, my you know, I begin to question myself as a person. You know, I'd love to be good at my sport, but I don't want to walk around people thinking, look at this douchebag. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that's where it's like, right. You know, it's, but then the thing that worries me the most is like, because of that fear of coming off as arrogant, it's almost as if I pull back completely from, you know, the self-confidence and the self-belief, right, in hopes of being more humble.
Yes. Okay.
So it's a question of balance.
Yes, and if you look at various personality types, the way people interact, there are some people that have a very aggressive personality, which is kind of what I think you're talking about. You know, they have this unrealistic belief in what they're capable of doing and who they are, and when you meet people like that, their fundamental philosophy is, in any given competition, I'm going to win, you're going to lose.
Right.
Okay? Win-lose kind of situation.
Very Michael Jordan kind of mindset.
Yes. On the other end of that stick, you have people who are very submissive. They're always looking for a way to please others. They're always putting others' needs before themselves. And so as a result, they get passed over, people don't listen to them, everybody devalues who they are because you never really see them take a stand on anything. right in the middle of that stick, and I actually had to go, I had to take a course when I was working for the Lysol company back in New York many years ago to help me figure this out. But right in the middle of that is the assertive personality. It's the person who knows themselves well enough and has a certain level of confidence that they can speak up on their behalf without offending the other person, without causing the other person to feel like it's a hostile situation taking place. But they're still confident enough to make their case, take their stand, and just deal with things objectively. And if you can work your way to that, that's the greatest way to get respect amongst the people that work for you and the other people in your industry. Because number one, they'll always look at you as a straight shooter. They look at you as somebody that doesn't back down in presence of adversity, somebody that you can count on. When you can develop those things, you don't have to be the blowhard.
Yeah.
You know, I give the microphone to anybody like that because it's all about the journey. People can look really good in the moment, but eventually it's going to catch up with them. You know?
Yeah, the whole fake it till you
And
make
with
it thing doesn't really work.
usually with assertiveness too, if it's done properly, it comes off as very, very confident.
Yes.
And it's very attractive.
And you don't have to see the best thing about that is it's the way you show up and interact with people. They feel that.
Right.
If you show up like a blowhard, like somebody that knows it all and nobody can question them, they're going to feel that too, but they're going to take a couple steps back. You know?
This guy's a try-hard, or this guy thinks he's all that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm fine. Let them be that because eventually they will you know, they'll fall. You know?
So
it's just a matter of time. You know?
So assertive is kind of like the balance between aggressive and submissive.
Yes. Yes.
Nice.
And what's interesting about it is you don't have to have the doctorate, the MBA.
Right.
You don't have to be, you know, the guy that's most in shape. All you have to do is be somebody who's been through enough experiences to be able to say, I've been down that road before. I know how that ends. That there's a lot. When you have certainty like that, there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in knowing it doesn't matter what you put in front of me. I'll figure it out. You know?
So you've coached a lot of business owners, right? What type of business do you think if you were to like, hey man, go start this business, you know, for me to make, you know, I'm not even going to say 7 figures. Let's say 10 million plus.
Okay.
What industry or like what kind of service do you, what kind of business do you think would be like the best methodology to go through it? Like, for example, service-based, product-based, or should I go raise VC capital and like, you know, start my own like next Facebook? Like what,
Wow.
like what would you think is like the greatest route to like accomplishing that kind of wealth?
Well, I think the first thing I would ask somebody is when you look at your raw talent, the stuff that you gravitate to, are you more product task based or are you more people based? You know, you very rarely find somebody who has high degrees and equal components of both. They usually favor working by themselves, working on projects, building things, getting things done, or working with and directing other people. So that's the first thing you have to really look at, because depending on what you put together, you may be in the wrong lane of the highway. So you got to look at that first. The second thing I would look at is, where is the economy going? I mean, you know, we've all been kind of in techno land for a lot of years now. I don't know where AI is going to take us. I'm sure it'll just be another dimension of everything that's been built to this point.
Sure.
But a lot of times I'll tell people, if you have a penchant for dealing, you know, successfully with people, that's the one element in commerce that's probably never going to go away. Now, some things can be replaced, but if what you provide actually helps other people in their jobs, their businesses, you know, some other element that interpersonal relationships are key to, that's what you should look at, because that's where you're going to thrive. And when people realize that not only are you good at what you do, but you love what you do and you're doing it for their benefit, you'll make a success out of whatever that looks like. And then the real question is, if it gets big enough to where it's starting to get away from you, then you have to decide how you're going to scale that and what size you want it to become.
How much of it has to do with luck?
Well, I think there are plenty of examples where people started businesses for the right reason and they just happened to be at a moment in time where some major shifts were taking place. And so they just happened to be in the right spot, and things just took off on them.
Yeah, because like you look at like take Steve Jobs as an example, his whole story, right? You know, when he met Steve Wozniak was already working on the computer, and he just saw the product, and he's like, "Oh, this is great. Let me go pitch it." Right? So I feel like he was just in the right place at the right time, and he just had that motive to like push. And he, you know, Apple's the freaking biggest company in the world now, but. You know, I've always been curious about that because, like, I've also met a lot of people who have all these characteristics and do all these things, but don't get really anywhere.
Yeah, and one of the other things that's key to being able to scale a business to the levels that you're talking about is you have to be able to have a good network of resources. Good example. Back in the early 90s, Amazon was a bookseller. You go online, you buy books. That's all they had. But over a 15-year period, they started investing in making this a much bigger marketplace online. All right? Back then, of course, the internet was just kind of starting up to a point where, you know, most people had some computer tube that was green and little white letters would go across it, and, you know, that was what you got off the internet. It wasn't like what we have today. But back then, the whole idea of being able to go online, find what you want, hit a button and order it, have it paid for, and show up on your doorstep the next day was fantasy. Nobody had that. Okay?
Now they have like a delivery within 2 hours.
Right. So, but what you had in that whole example was you had a company that for 15 years lost $250 million every single quarter. Mm-hmm. The amount of money that they sunk into creating the infrastructure that does what we all take for granted today took time and massive amounts of money. Now, he didn't have all that in his back pocket.
No.
He had a ton of investors with a lot of money and no innovation skills that decided supporting him was the right thing to do. And I tell people this all the time. I said, sure, Amazon has now become the de facto marketplace where you can buy anything you want. Right on your computer, on your phone, right? Get it the next day. What do you think they really changed in terms of the human condition? What do you think their invention really changed?
It's kind of like TikTok. I feel like the patience on what's it called? How quickly you want something has become like it's like a must. Like I've met kids who would be like, "Oh man, I ordered this thing and it took a week to come and they're pissed." You know, they're annoyed.
That whole business model completely changed
the instant gratification.
Logistics.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
logistics forever. I mean, before you could have companies ship stuff to you, might take a week or 10 days.
Wow.
You'd pay money for that shipping. No, there was no free shipping. You want it shipped, here's what it cost. That was the standard back then, 20, 30 years ago. Today, everybody else has had to meet that demand of being able to ship stuff out within a couple of days and do it free.
Yeah, how scary is the infrastructure of like UPS, USPS, and then even Amazon's delivery structure?
Right.
Like, how scary is it to where something like overnight shipping across the country exists? How scary is that infrastructure that there is some truck who's conveniently going in that direction that will make that delivery available? Like,
oh, I'm just driving down the street. I'm going to stop off at Joe's and dump this box here.
like how large is your infrastructure to where it's just like, oh yeah, we probably have like 6 trucks going that way anyways.
So, you know, it's funny speaking about that. So we all have ordered from Amazon before. I'm used to the whole Prime 1 day, 2 day shipping. I think it was like 2-3 months ago, I ordered a couple, I think, lotions and like camera equipment and stuff like that. And I just I don't even remember. I just went place order. They make it so easy to buy. Right. And then I leave the house and I come back an hour and a half later and it's on my doorstep. Right. And I'm like, wait, what? This there's no way. This is probably something else. And I open it up. It's exactly what I'm like, how in God's name did you get like, I feel like a human being will take longer to just like literally get the package.
Bro, Adam, soon enough, you're gonna wake up thinking about a product, and before breakfast, it's gonna be at your door.
You're going to think about it. And the next time you go on Instagram, it's going to be the ad that you first see.
Yo,
Dude,
no, that's
yeah,
scary. That's scary. I'm not
telling you,
even.
that's coming.
Neuralink, man. Neuralink.
Neuralink. No. Honestly, it trips me out because some part of me is just like, is this like revelation? Can I still believe that like God has like destined for me to think about something, or do they have these abilities now to like go into my brain and understand what my thoughts are? Because I swear to God, I'll be thinking of like a funny video or a meme or whatever or a product. I won't even say it out loud, and then next thing I know, a few swipes later, it comes up on Instagram, and I'm just like.
Yeah, no. Have you looked into Neuralink at all?
No, absolutely
they're
not.
talking about like the things like, for example, like it'll eventually be able to read thoughts.
It'll put a chip in you like your pet.
Yeah. I could just look at you.
We're skipping that as soon as possible.
I could just look at you and we could just communicate through thought.
Dude, that sounds boring, dude.
Yeah, I know. But
that's actually kind of scary. That's actually kind of scary, bro. Right. Because it's like, how am I going to suppress all my inappropriate thoughts? Right. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, maybe there's like a mute button or something.
Not everything you think about needs to be known by everybody.
Oh, right. No, for sure. No, please, God, no. Oh, my God. But no, I remember, I will never forget that experience because I remember opening that package and saying, like, there's no way like a human being took the product, packaged it, put it on a truck, and delivered it in under an hour and a half. Like, I feel like just the time it takes just to package something should have taken longer.
Okay, so Amazon did this thing called last mile delivery. And over in Mission Viejo, there's a huge Amazon distribution center over there. And it's only been there for, I don't know, maybe 2 years.
Where?
It's off of Geronimo. When you get that High Park, there's a commercial area over there, and they must have bought like a huge building. But in the morning, if I'm going down El Toro Road at a certain time, I can see a line of Amazon trucks coming up Geronimo, getting ready to get on El Toro. And there's like 8 or 9 of them.
About the RV building? Like they used to sell RVs there and stuff?
It was some big building that was vacated, and they came in there and they bought it and they repurposed it for this. But that's what allows people to show up at your house at 9 o'clock on Sunday night. And you're thinking, what the hell are they doing out there? Well, that's their route. You know, they've got 24/7 people just driving around, and they just go pick stuff up and they go out. Some of these Amazon drivers make some really big money for doing that.
Yeah, no, Amazon even has a system, right, where it's almost like an Uber design, right? Almost like an Uber system where it's like you just sign up, and with your own car, you go pick up a few packages from their centers, and then just go deliver it to a couple addresses, and then just you can do that multiple times a day. And
if you want to be a last mile delivery service, they have a program. Well, they will invest and they will train you and help you get up and running so you can do that. I mean, we had a car show up one Saturday, and I'd never heard of this before. It's called Piggy Car. Who the hell came up with that name?
I've heard of it.
It's a Piggy Car.
I've heard of it. I've seen it. I don't know where I've seen it.
There's been several times where they've come and dropped off Amazon stuff. So they're a contractor to help Amazon with their last mile delivery. So that's the kind of innovation that very few people become a part of. I mean, Walmart's another example. You know, back in the early 70s, Walmart had one store in Bentonville, Arkansas. That was their home. That was where the family was. And, you know, as of maybe 20 years ago, they became the largest retailer in the world.
Wow.
So you're always going to have examples of families or pioneers or people that start from fairly humble means, and something just catches fire, and all of a sudden people start throwing money at them, and other people get involved, and before you know it, it's growing like crazy. But that's not the normal business. I mean, you know, 50% of small businesses every year that start up go out of business within 2 years.
Yeah, I know that's like a scary number because I mean, I feel like especially since like COVID hit, there's been a lot of like wannabe entrepreneurs who like like, oh, it sounds cool, so let me just give it a shot. You know, and it's like a lot more than just let me just give it a shot.
Well, they're the folks that develop something in their garage, and their neighbors and their family really like it, and somebody comes and says, why don't you make a business out of this? And so they do. And sometimes it becomes an official business. You know, they have to move out of the garage and find retail space or commercial space. And other times it never leaves the garage, and it just becomes an expensive hobby. You know, so yeah, I mean, it really gets back to, does the individual believe enough in themselves and what it is they're trying to grow to stay the journey? Because the journey is what will kill you if you don't stay on the road long enough.
So how much of innovation is, would you say, is like studying the marketplace and seeing what missing components that you feel like you can add to it versus like just literally dreaming of like a world that you want to create?
I think people that are the best at innovation are the ones that just basically look around and just say, what can I do better?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, based off your question, I'm curious. What's the biggest, like, how far off is dreaming and innovation? Like, how far are, like, I would assume they're actually fairly close to each other.
Well, I asked that because like in today's world, maybe I'm wrong, but like, I mean, I'm, from the millennial age, but like in a sense, I feel sometimes like there's so much that's been invented today that it's like, it's kind of tough to like sit there and go, what other added components can I bring to the world?
Right.
Or at least the things that you need to add require such like intense skills to build. Like it's no longer like, oh, I can go build like a marketplace online, for example. Not that I'm saying that's a simple thing. It's a very complex thing that they've built, but like now you have to like to innovate, you have to do such complicated stuff to be able to like position yourself in the marketplace as like this.
All right, so have you guys ever heard of a concept? It's been out a while, this is not new, called blue ocean strategy.
Yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
Okay, so it's an interesting concept. You can find a lot of good stuff on the internet. There's been books written about it. But basically the whole premise is most people look at a given market and they figure out how to get in it and take a piece of what's already there. Okay? And so you're fighting competition. And if the market's big and the cost of entry is steep, then you've got to figure out, how am I going to get in there and take a piece that nobody else either can take or wants. But you're dealing with a finite market, something that's already there. Blue ocean strategy says, look for places where there isn't a defined market, or look for a market that is basically going away and figure out how to repurpose it. So the example that most of these books will give you is this company, Cirque du Soleil. Have you ever been to one of their shows? You ever heard of Cirque du Soleil?
Right.
It's the ones with the horses, and they're just doing all kind of crazy stuff under a tent.
Right.
They actually had one out here on
circus.
405.
Oh, okay.
It's a very modern, fancy way of basically conducting a circus act. But they've taken it to a level just nobody ever saw this. And basically what they said was the traditional circus, the Barnum and Bailey years, are going away.
Yeah.
The animals are getting taken out. Parents aren't taking their kids there anymore. It's basically a kid thing anyway. So these guys created a whole new aura of circus entertainment for the adults. And once they did that, they just blew the whole market up. And they owned it because nobody else was doing it. So they transformed a dying market and created something new and different. That's the whole blue ocean strategy. Don't try to get into something that's already defined. Look at a new opportunity. If there's no market at all, create your own.
I see. So I feel like that's really interesting, because it's like, I feel like what a lot of people struggle with, it's kind of like based on your question, is like they feel like they need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, right.
Right? To where it's like they need to come up with something so innovative that like no human being across the 7 billion people that we are in the world, nobody's ever reached that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I know, from what I know about you, right? I know you for sure thought that way, because I know I think that way sometimes. I want to be innovative enough to where it's like, oh my God, why has nobody ever thought about that? But it's like, it's not necessarily like, hey, you need to recreate the wheel, but rather look upon what's existed before.
Right.
And then from there, figure out ways to either make it better or you said, bring it back to life.
Yeah. I mean, who says you need a wheel? When you look at Japan's train system, the bullet train, there's no wheels on that thing. It runs by magnetics. So when that thing gets going, the whole train comes off the track. It's still held on there by magnetism, but it's being run electronically because of the way magnets
Wait,
work.
what? That's the first time I've heard
That's
that.
insane.
It's a floating
It's
train.
just hovering.
It's hovering. That's what it is. It runs
smokes.
on the tracks, but it runs above the ground.
So speaking of that, actually, it's
Wow.
crazy because that's how they're thinking about like how flying cars are going to happen. They're not actually going to be flying so high. They're going to be more so like there's going to be like a magnetic pulse from the ground up. No, I asked this from personal experience because I was in the agency space for many years and I exited that, and I'm in the family business right now with cybersecurity. My dad's technical, I'm not, right? And so I try to like see different angles on how I could like innovate in this industry, and it's such a complex space that's highly technical that I kind of get confused and lost on like what on earth kind of value am I gonna bring to this like huge thing, right? Because I'm not like, have you like Chat GPT, OpenAI, those things, like those innovations, I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but maybe I feel like like how do you even come up with ideas like that? You know what I mean?
All right. So when I think of cybersecurity, I think of services and protections that are offered to companies, businesses, places where they house other people's data. All right. In fact, one just recently, I'm trying to think of who it was, got exposed. There was a thing in the paper about it. But I'm wondering if cybersecurity shouldn't be focused on the individual, because when an organization gets breached, everybody that has information in there is now in trouble to some degree. I don't belong to that organization, but somehow they're storing my stuff.
Yeah.
How do I get cybersecurity protection for just my stuff, so that regardless of what goes on around me, I know that my information is not getting breached?
It's safe, yeah.
I don't know. But
so it's like outside the box thinking.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting.
It's like outside of the box thinking.
Yeah. Because it's like, how is that when somebody already has my information, how could it then still be protected even within their supervision, I guess?
Right.
Or within their protection.
Right. And look, you guys are dealing in a really, really interesting environment, because every time you come up with a protection defense device, there's people all around the world looking for ways to get in.
Oh, it's insane.
I mean, it's like 24/7.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you stay ahead of something like that. Because these folks, that's all they do 24 hours a day, is just figure out how to get through your code so they can go and take your stuff.
It's a constant thing. It's like a continuous. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
I'm
That's
sure
all I'm
there
gonna
is.
say. There's a lot to it. I joined like a year ago, and I've been trying to like just like figure it out. I'm still very like novice in it. It's a very complex infrastructure. It's a complex industry. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's nonstop. And competition's insane because the money that's being thrown into it. It's like billions of dollars that are just like people that are just. I think there is this. Speaking of. Startups. I was listening to this like podcast. It was talking about how this new startup just raised $1.7 billion for like an AI revolutionary security tool. And I'm like, what the heck? Like that's nuts.
Well, think of all the people that get hired by defense contractors or the government in general, and they're criminals, but yet they know so much that the organizations say, well, let's hire them and have them show us how they got in. So that's their way up. And some of these guys go straight, and eventually they open their own firms.
That's hilarious.
But isn't that amazing? It's like, okay, he just stole, I don't know how many billions of dollars worth of trade secrets. He should go to jail for the rest of his life. But no, let's hire him so he can tell us how to keep other people out.
Yep. Yeah. So, there's actually a whole thing called ethical hacking. Where companies...
you hire people to come in and try to break your system.
Yeah, it's called pen testing, penetration testing. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And it's very freaking expensive. Like they'll hire like big companies will hire like yearly like just hackers all around the world just to come in and try to penetrate their systems.
Right.
And if they're successful, show me what you did. Let's make sure nobody else does it.
But just think how much that's worth to find out up front and control it, as opposed to be hit by it and then have to go into damage control.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Reverse engineer the
exactly
the security.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So I wanna kind of transition the conversation a little bit, and what was the question specifically? I want to ask, I got it. How do you help develop someone's, I guess like self-belief or rewire their way of thinking?
Okay, so I learned this, and I'm not going to profess to be an expert in it, but I learned this from the gentleman who owned the company that I bought the franchise from. All right. He's well known in the field of neuroscience, neuroreconditioning. His name's John Asraf. He's got a whole nother program now that's on the internet called, I think it's called NeuroGym or something like that. But he figured out what you had to do with the brain in order to get more to a point where your brain was like a search and destroy mission, going out and finding the stuff that you needed. And it was from his neural reconditioning program. And basically, it wasn't brand new science. It kind of got its start from age-old things like affirmations. You know, if you say certain things to yourself over and over and over again, because your subconscious mind, the only reason it's there is to regulate your body function so you don't have to think about breathing and eye blinking and stuff like that. And it just collects data since you started your life. Mm-hmm. It collects data because it's what it's trying to figure out is, based on all the experiences that keep coming in, where should it direct your life? Where should your life path be?
Yeah.
So that's what the backside of your brain is designed to do. And it can be programmed because there's a few things that it doesn't come equipped to do. It can't tell the difference between theory and reality. If you go to a movie sometimes and it's a real tearjerker and you find yourself welling up or your wife's crying or whatever, well, it's not happening in real life. You're just watching it on a screen. Brain can't tell the difference. So it responds to things that it visualizes. Mm-hmm. Okay? So in response to your question, you have to retrain your brain based on what you put in it. You have to change your dialogue, what they call your inner talk track. You have to start through affirmations, daily chanting. You have to start telling yourself over and over again what you're capable of, what you want, what you're willing to do. And over time, the brain starts to say, okay, I keep hearing this stuff showing up over and over again. This must be what this person wants. I need to help them find it. Mm-hmm. The age-old example of this is when you come home one day and your wife tells you, she's pregnant, she's going to have a baby, and you're all happy now. It's your first child. For the next couple of months, you walk around, all you see are pregnant ladies. Well, where were these pregnant ladies before? Well, you weren't looking for them because it wasn't something important in your own life.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to artificially stimulate what's going on in your head to help refocus what you're willing to work towards. And if you do that, you can basically reset your own clock for your focus, your commitment, your dedication, what you're willing to basically spend most of your life in pursuit of. And you can change your mentality for being successful at whatever it is you've figured out you really want.
Okay. So it's like you gotta trick yourself in a sense.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like self-manipulation.
Head hacking.
Yeah, head hacking. It's like self-manipulation.
But you can go out online and you can type in affirmations and neural reconditioning. You can find all kind of information on this stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's some people who have taken it to really, really big extremes. If you study this other principles called the law of attraction, mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know, there's somewhere between, depending on what source you go, anywhere from 11 to 15 of these natural laws, okay? And if you study them and you practice them, supposedly you're supposed to get the kind of the benefit from just being better connected with your environment. And so some people will go that route. I just think that if you really are sold on something you want to pursue and you have the inner confidence to see it through, and you surround yourself with the right people. Everybody has an inner circle. And I talk to clients a lot about this. Who's in your inner circle? Who are the 5 or 6 people that you listen to most frequently? Are they there for your benefit? Will they tell you things that you need to know even if you don't want to hear them? Are they there to help you, or are they there to hold you back? Sometimes when you start taking inventory and looking at who's in that circle, you're going to find 2 or 3 people in there that you've known all your life. You like them, you're best friends, but they're not really there for your benefit. Mm. They're there to keep you next to them, which may not be the direction you need to go in. Mm. So sometimes you really need to just kind of shake up your inner circle because, and I'm trying to think of who, one of the business gurus, I think is not living anymore, was famous for saying it. It might have been Jim Rohn. But the saying goes like this: your future success, and they framed it in income, is the average of the 5 closest people you hang out with. So when you start looking at that, income is just a measure of success. the people in your inner circle are really important to how successful you become.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's also like a religious. So we're both Muslims, so like there's like a religious aspect of that too.
Mm-hmm.
Where like we're taught like you know, in the afterlife you're raised up with your close friends, the people who you used to look up to the most, which is like a pretty profound statement because it goes to show you like it really has like it really affects your life, like, you know, who you surround yourself with, who you're around, the kind
Absolutely.
of things you hear. It shapes you, you know. What about, okay, so let's wrap this up with this question because I'm curious. If somebody's like watching this and they're like, I don't like my environment, like what steps can they take to change it? Because there's not a lot of, I mean, at least from my experience, I mean, I'll talk from personal experience. So when I first started business, I was like, you know, I'm going to go surround myself with rich people, right? Because I want to learn how to become rich. And then I found out rich people are assholes. Like, and I was like, I don't like these guys. Like,
Right.
They have a lot of money in the bank, but they party, they drink, they're not religious, they're not like, you know, motivated to like do things. And then like, okay, let's say I do find somebody who's like, you know, doesn't party, doesn't drink, okay, not on the same religious pathway. And then I'm like, you know what? Okay, so religion's very important to me. All right. So then I go look at faith and I find people who are like not motivated to make money because they're like, oh, God has my back.
Right.
So it's like, I've had
he'll
this
take
like,
care of me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've had like
Right.
this personal challenge with that where it's like, well, okay, then I really don't know who to surround myself with because I have yet to find somebody who's like, okay, you know what? I like this guy because like he has everything that I would like to desire or become. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because they're looking for professional mentors, people that can guide them and show them the way so they can eventually get to where they want to go. I think when you're looking at your inner circle, I think you've really got to look at the individual and say, does this person stand for something that I would be willing to defend? Do they have the ethical credibility, the moral compass that I buy into? You know, do they share my values? Because we all have values. A lot of times we just don't talk about them a lot. Mm-hmm. But if those folks have your values, if regardless of where they've gone in their own lives, if they're confident and happy with what they've achieved, that's worth something. If they're the kind of people that will tell you things straight, not sugarcoat them because they're trying to defend the friendship more than do what's right for you, if they're willing to give you straight feedback, that's another good one. And sometimes you know, let's face it, today you might have to look a while to find those folks. And it doesn't mean that the 5 or 6 that you have in that circle need to know each other. They don't all have to come from the same spot.
Yeah,
you could have one from your mosque, and you could have one from a professional setting, a distant relative, you know, somebody else that you've met along the way.
Oh, so each one fills a certain need?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because the reason you have them is because if you have to go to them and ask for help, you want to know that where the help's coming from is legitimate. Because once they give you the help, you've still got to go out and do something with it. And that's what I find a lot of times people struggle with. It's not what I'm going after. It's, you know, you're saying if you're not happy with your environment. My first question is, what are you not happy with? And do you think the environment created that or you created that? Sometimes if you're asking things out of your environment that aren't appropriate or aren't realistic, you can be frustrated, but it's not the environment. It's how you've showed up and what you think is right and just in the moment, and maybe that's not the case. Maybe what you're trying to pursue takes way longer to get there. I had a friend, this is really interesting. He, for part of his career, he taught art in a local community college. And he said every semester, the new crop of kids coming in, he'd always find this happen. One of them would go over to the bookshelf, and, you know, they had picture books there with all the famous artists and their drawings and things like that. And he saw one kid sitting down and looking through this thing. It was a Picasso book. And he knew exactly what was happening. And he went over there and he grabbed the book and he slammed it shut. And the kid was like, you know, what are you doing? He goes, don't look at that. He goes, Picasso did that work at the prime of his career. If you want to see what he was like when he was where you are, go look at that book. He goes, the stuff he created back then was garbage. But like, this kid was looking at Picasso's finest work and saying, how am I going to be able to do that?
Right.
And so a lot of times people's expectations get away with them because they hang around with the rich and famous and they see what they have. They just don't know how they got there, what it took for them to get to that.
Oh, snap. That's different.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
very
I've faced that so much. I mean, even through the podcast, because like I've met some pretty cool individuals. Like, I mean, before Larry King passed away, I met him face to face. So like, and you sit down with these guys, and you're like, holy crud, like man, like they're on just top of it, right? And you go, whoa, how the heck am I gonna get there? You know, I used to be hella obsessed with like biographies of like these successful billionaires and all these things. And yeah, no, I agree. There's like a step-by-step process to it for sure. But hey, Steve, I appreciate you. Do you have any final questions at all?
No, this is fantastic.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
This was such a cool way to do this,
Yeah.
Very informative. I have a lot of questions that I feel like, but I'm not going to say them publicly, but we'll definitely talk on a personal level.
You have my contact information. You're always welcome to call and chat.
Will do.
That's all we can ask for. That's all we can ask for.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online?
The best thing for people to do is just look for Growth Source Coaching. Don't type in Steve Smith because there's famous Steve Smiths out there and I can't compete with that. But if you just type in Growth Source Coaching, go to my website. My bio's there. I've got videos there. I tell everybody exactly what I do and how I do it, and I show other people that have done it. And if you like that, then there's ways to get a hold of me. My phone number's on there. My email's on there.
Oh,
but
cool.
I like to warm people up because if people see what coaching is a very personal experience. And just because I coach doesn't mean I'm going to be a good match for you. And I'd rather you find somebody you really click with because not everything is easy. And so you've got to really depend on the person you're working with to kind of get you through that. But they can find out everything. And if they like what they see, then it's real easy to get a hold of me.
Oh, very cool. All right, Steve. Well, I appreciate you for hopping on the show, man.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you so
Adam.
much. Yeah, pleasure.
BB?
Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.